کنفرانس در پارلمان انگلستان سخنرانی اعضای هر دو مجلس عوام و اعیان و حقوقدانان برجسته، بزرگداشت روز جهانی حقوق بشر و حمایت از مقاومت و مبارزه مردم ایران.
سخنرانی‌های بارونس اولون عضو مجلس اعیان، جیم شانون نماینده پارلمان انگلستان از حزب دموکراتیک ایرلند و سخنگوی حزب در امور حقوق بشر، مارتین دی نماینده پارلمان انگلستان از حزب ملی اسکاتلند و سخنگوی حزب در امور حقوق بشر، استیو مککیب نماینده پارلمان انگلستان.
بارونس اولون: انگلستان باید سران رژیم به ویژه خامنه‌ای و رئیسی و سپاه پاسداران را تحریم کند تا آنها بفهمند که نمی‌توانند از عدالت و پاسخگویی فرار کنند.
خانم رجوی، شما رهبری بزرگترین و سازمان یافته ترین ائتلاف اپوزیسیون برای یک جمهوری دموکراتیک در ایران را بر عهده دارید و حضور شما مثل همیشه باعث افتخار است.
I'm very pleased to be here today with all our cross-party colleagues and all our guests today, and most welcome to Parliament. Above all, I would like to endorse Bob Blackman's welcome to you, Madam Rajavi, to the UK Parliament today. You are leading the largest and most organised Iranian opposition coalition for a democratic republic in Iran, and it is an honour to be in your presence, as always. Madam Rajavi, to commemorate Human Rights Day with an important discussion on how best we advance the cause of human rights in Iran and what we can do to make sure that the people of Iran can one day experience basic rights and freedoms as we do here in the UK. And there can be no doubt, as you said, that our efforts must be built on closer cooperation with your movement as the true representative of the democratic aspiration of the Iranian people. And I agree with you that international efforts must be focused on ending the impunity that exists in Iran. Sadly, due to international failure at the UN, which Dr. Mosk referred to, and the West's softly approach, which is to accommodate the regime, thereby hoping to encourage a change in its appalling behavior, we have a situation now in Iran where human rights defenders and pro-democracy activists are imprisoned, while human rights abusers, like the current president, Raisi, are promoted instead of being held accountable for the atrocities for which they're responsible. And that is totally unacceptable. And it explains the current situation, which is unsustainable for anyone with conscience. And the fact that the regime has now enacted new legislation with tougher penalties, harsher punishments for women and girls who are protesting and who are challenging even the compulsory hijab laws speaks for itself and shows what kind of regime we are dealing with today. I think the courage of the women and girls of Iran is recognized in the recent awards at which we heard over the weekend. These awards represent important international recognition of and support for the struggle against the tyranny of the Iranian regime. But as long as this regime is allowed to act with impunity, nothing will change. I urge our government to lead an international coalition of allies and partners asking the UN Security Council to review the regime's appalling human rights record, to refer those responsible for state repression, for systematic human rights violations, to prosecution. I also believe, as Madam Rajavi said in her remarks, that our governments could take important steps here in the UK to hold the regime to account by looking into prosecution of its officials and leaders under international law and the legal principle of universal jurisdiction. There is also a recommendation that the UN Special Rapporteur on Iran, Javed Rehman, is putting forward in his latest report to the General Assembly. It makes no sense for our government to endorse his mandate and then turn around and ignore his recommendations. In the meantime, I believe the appropriate step is to continue to impose targeted human rights sanctions against the regime. Our government must include the regime's leaders, particularly the Supreme Leader Khomeini and his President Raisi, in the next round of sanctions to make it clear to the regime that they cannot and will not escape justice and accountability. It should also prescribe the IRGC. There is absolutely no doubt about that. It's internationally recognized that its activities fulfill all the conditions for prescription under UK law. And finally, the best policy we can have for our government is to stand with the Iranian people and their organised opposition, led by you, Madam Rajavi, to ensure that you succeed in establishing a free, democratic and secular republic in Iran. The future of the people of Iran is with its people, best represented by you, Madam Rajavi, and by the very courageous people who work with us here in the UK Parliament, not by the brutal regime which is torturing and killing its people. Thank you.
جیم شانون. قتل عام 67 اکنون به عنوان مصداق آشکار جنایت علیه بشریت و نقض قوانین بین المللی شناخته می شود. این عمل هولناک باید توسط رهبران همه ادیان و مذاهب به شدت و به طور صریح محکوم شود.
First of all, Madam President-elect, Madam Rajivi, it is always a pleasure to see you and to see your smile as well, because you always encourage us, and may the Lord continue to bless you and all that you do as well, and we wish you well. It's great to share this panel with you, with colleagues and other distinguished guests today at this very important meeting on the International Human Rights Day. If any country in this world merits a special attention on this day, it's Iran. And that's what I believe. We all believe that as well. We know about the dire human rights situation in the country. We know about unbearable situation for both religious and ethnic minorities in Iran. This goes to show that no sector of the Iranian society is immune to the state oppression, which also explains the involvement of all sectors of the society in the ongoing uprising that we see unfolding in Iran. We wish all those protesters and all those people who are standing up for liberty all the best in the months and years ahead. For me, the regime's use of religion to justify its atrocities, its brutality, and its terror is one of its most outrageous crimes. I'm appalled that innocent people whose only crime seems to speak up against the government for their fundamental rights are being executed under the fabricated charges of waging 88. This regime made charge was this man-made charge was used to justify the mass execution of 30,000 political prisoners in prisons across Iran, which is now known as clear case of crime against humanity and violation of international law. This appalling practice must be condemned strongly and unequivocally by leaders of all faiths and religion. So we're dealing with a regime whose repression and cruelty do not know or recognise any boundary whatsoever. It misuses religion as well as the entire powers and the privileges of a state to maintain its totalitarian rule. And that is why an international intervention is crucial. Indeed, never more has there been a need for an international intervention. And let me make it quite clear that when I say international intervention, I don't talk about the UK and the West bringing about regime change in Iran through a coup which happened in the 50s and the 60s. No, as others have said, it's the Iranian people who will decide their future, as it should be. And as Madam Rajivi has so kindly said, explained in her remarks earlier, they are determined to end the current regime to establish a democratic republic where freedom, liberty, and the right to make your own decisions are there. I wish them well. Wish them all well and success in this endeavour. Because if the world needs anything now, it is an Iran that is working for peace, an Iran that's working for freedom, an Iran that's working for human rights and stability, and working with the NCRI and Madam Rajivi, and knowing of their 10-point plan for the future of Iran. I see no reason at all why the Iranian people should fear or indeed fail in fulfilling their dreams of a free, democratic and prosperous republic roll on that day. But with international intervention, I also mean British intervention to uphold international law, UN conventions, and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Madam Rajivi set out in her remarks what this support should look like and what the Iranian people should expect from the United Kingdom government. I believe there are legitimate expectations, and I see no reason why our government should resist to implement them. So, in conclusion, I urge our government, my government, to reach out to the NCRI to assist efforts of the Iranian people to hold the regime to account, to prosecute its leaders under existing UN mechanisms and international law. That should be the focus of our Iran policy. As I say at the end of nearly every meeting I do, our goal is a free Iran. Long live that free Iran.
مارتین دی، انگلستان و جامعه بین المللی